Luigi Mangione faces trial for the murder of Brian Thompson, possibly twice, two trials this year if the current schedule holds up. May it please the audience, I'm Rich Schoenstein, and this is So Sue Me. We usually talk about civil litigation, but you know I've been following the Luigi Mangione prosecution, both in federal and state court. We have some new developments today. There was a hearing in federal court, so I want to get into it, talk about what happened, talk about the schedule, and talk about what's going on with this case. So, you guys know Luigi Mangione is accused of shooting and murdering Brian Thompson, an executive of United Healthcare, on the streets of Manhattan, Fifth Avenue at 5 o'clock in the morning last year. He was arrested in Pennsylvania later. He was brought to New York, and he was charged both in the federal system and in the state system. And there have been a whole slew of pretrial proceedings in both courts, state and federal. In the state case, he's currently charged with second-degree murder. He was charged with first-degree murder, but the first-degree charges were thrown out because the prosecution's attempt to connect it to terrorism was rejected by the court. He is charged with second-degree murder in the state case. The maximum punishment for that is life in prison, but with the possibility of parole. In the federal case, he is charged with murder and stalking. He faces the possibility of life in prison without the possibility of parole, but he does not face the possibility of the death penalty because although that was implicated in the federal system, the judge rejected the charges to the extent they might impose the death penalty, finding that there wasn't an underlying crime of violence. Both of these cases are now steamrolling towards trial. There were hearings and motions about what evidence would be admitted. The federal court has essentially ruled on all of that. The state court, which held a lengthy evidentiary hearing late last year to determine whether certain evidence found in his backpack was admissible, hasn't issued a formal ruling on that. We're still waiting to find out. The state prosecution is set to start June 8th. The trial is set to start in state court on June 8th, and in federal court, it was set to start in September, and that was the subject of this morning's hearing, because Luigi Mangione's defense has been saying loudly and repeatedly, this is unfair. We can't do two trials in 1 year. Put aside, we have commitments on other cases that keep us plenty busy, and those lawyers are very popular in New York right now. They're working on Harvey Weinstein, among other things, but they're very busy. But put all that aside, it's not appropriate to do two murder trials for one defendant in the same year. And then, of course, lurking in the background of all of this is what we call double jeopardy, and I'm going to get back to that in a minute. But put aside double jeopardy, the defense lawyers are saying we can't do a trial in June and a trial in September. That's too much. It's too much to prepare for. Now, challenged on that in federal court this morning, the judge pointed out that it is the same evidence and a lot of the same case. Prepping for one trial is to some extent prepping for the other trial. The defense pushed back. There are certain arguments that can be made in state court that can't be made in federal court. The strategies might be slightly different based on the charges. So there are differences in the two prosecutions. Ultimately, what the federal court ruled today, it's pushed the trial back a little bit. It pushed the trial back to October 26 or November 2, but in federal court, they're going to do a very lengthy and involved process to select a jury. Remember, jury selection in this case is difficult because it is a very well-known case, and there are a lot of opinions on this case, strongly held opinions on both sides. Now, the loudest ones have been what I'll call supporters of Luigi Mangione, although I think that's a big tent that encompasses a few different groups. There are definitely people who think Luigi Mangione did kill Brian Thompson, but was somehow justified in doing so because of all the problems with health insurance in the United States. I disagree with that theory. I don't think it's ever justified to shoot somebody in the back on a street. If you want to make a point about insurance in this country, you have a lot of good points you can make. You can find otherwise ways to do it. But there are people who are Mangione supporters because they view him as some kind of hero, some kind of martyr, some kind of positive influence. There are also people who think he might be innocent and that he should get a fair trial. And I fall a little bit into that camp. I'm not going to form a view on his guilt or innocence without being closer to the evidence, but he surely should have a fair trial. I mean, everybody in this country is supposed to have a fair trial. That's just fundamental to the whole criminal justice system that we have. There are people who think he's being treated unfairly. They point to the fact, that perp walk when he was brought into New York, the publication of information against him, loud decrees by public officials that he's guilty, and now the idea that he has to face 2 trials in rapid succession. Anyway, the federal trial has been moved to October 26th or November 2nd, and this jury questionnaire process is going to occupy some time in April and May, leading up to a conference in federal court on June 5th, which would be only a few days before the state court conference is set to proceed. That's the current schedule. Now, let's talk about double jeopardy for a minute. You cannot try a person twice for the same crime. If a person goes to trial once and they are acquitted, you do not get another shot at them. Now, sometimes the same conduct makes someone guilty of different crimes in different forums. And it may be that Luigi Mangione has violated both state and federal law and could be tried on both of those, especially if he's found guilty in the first trial. But there is this potential double jeopardy argument out there. It's not ripe yet. The fact that he's being prosecuted in both the federal and state system is not double jeopardy because he hasn't gone to trial. Jeopardy doesn't attach until a jury is sworn in. So he hasn't had single jeopardy yet, much less double jeopardy. And we see this kind of thing commonly where someone has committed violations of state and federal law or violations of law in multiple states, and they may be subject to multiple prosecutions. There's nothing unconstitutional about that. It doesn't really ripen into an argument until at least one of the trials begins. And once jeopardy attaches in one court, you would have an argument that you can't attach jeopardy in another court. And that is why we're seeing this fight between the state court and the federal court as to who goes first. The court that goes second doesn't have an assurance that they'll get to do a trial, because it may be the case by the time the first trial ends that Luigi Mangione would be protected by double jeopardy. So the state prosecutors want to go first, the federal prosecutors want to go first, and I think a little bit each of the courts was trying to line themselves up to go first, although the federal court, which was the first court to set a trial date, and then the state court came in with an earlier trial date. I note the federal court hasn't tried to move back in front. One other thing, and this is super technical, and I'm not going to get into it too deeply. The double jeopardy argument is better for Mangione if the federal case was to go first. New York state law has stronger protection for double jeopardy than federal law. So Mangione would have been better off if his goal is to prevent 2 trials. He would have been better off if the federal trial had gone first. He would have a stronger argument in state court. So the current posture of these cases, where the state court goes first, that is to the detriment of Luigi Mangione's double jeopardy argument. Now, he probably didn't want to push too strongly for the federal case to go first because that's the one that has the steeper potential penalty. It doesn't have the death penalty anymore, but remember, federal court is life in prison without parole. State court is with parole. And on that theory, you might rather face the state charges first. Now, why are we doing this twice? Why are there two different courts, two different sets of prosecutors pursuing this? Why do they appear to be engaged in some kind of race to trial? I think this is a terrible look for the prosecutors. In the good old days, if you had multiple prosecutions in multiple forms, the prosecutors might cooperate. They might say to each other, our mutual shared goal is justice. We all think this person is guilty of murder, and our shared goal is to get a conviction and put him behind bars for the maximum time possible. And so we're going to cooperate. We're going to share evidence. We're going to figure out who has the better case. We're going to figure out which law is better. We're going to figure out what jury pool might be better. And we're going to make a decision together about what trial should go first. That does not appear to be what happened here. It doesn't seem like the federal prosecutors and the state prosecutors are cooperating at all. You could understand that from the current political context, New York State being what it is, and the federal government being what it is. And we know under this administration, the federal DOJ has really been changed a lot. And a lot of line prosecutors have left the system, and different people are in the system, and they're very beholden now to political agenda. I mean, that's why the death penalty was sought in this case. The death penalty was sort of a stretch in the federal system, but the federal agenda supported trying to steeply punish anybody who would go after a major corporate executive. I mean, that is a person the federal government is out to protect more than the average Joe on the street. I think we could just fairly say that. So they wanted to go after the maximum penalty. They wanted to send a message. That has slightly backfired, and there is no death penalty in the case. But because of this political agendas, there's no cooperation. And now we've created a race to trial that gives Luigi Mangione a potential due process argument on appeal. I don't know if it will win or not, but this is now a live argument for him to say, I didn't have a fair shot at this. From day one, they gave me a perp walk. They publicized me as being guilty. They over-prosecuted me. They sought terrorism charges in state court. They sought the death penalty in federal court. And they made me subject to 2 trials in violation of double jeopardy in the same year. And I couldn't adequately put on a defense under the time limit. They're handing him all of these arguments, which, if your goal is to prosecute and convict somebody you think is a murderer, I don't know why you would hand him all of those arguments. It makes no sense to me that these two prosecutorial entities can't get together on this and work this out, because it's a little bit of a clown show the way it's become a race to trial. So that is my view on it. Whether or not it would be a double jeopardy violation depends on what happens in the first trial and what is expected to happen at the second trial. That's not a ripe argument. The first trial of Luigi Mangione will go forward because it's a valid prosecution and will be a valid trial. And then we will see what will happen. But I do think that the prosecutions so far, in what should be a straightforward case, right? They think he shot a man on the street. They think they have him on video. They caught him with the evidence. They caught him with the gun. They caught him with the manifesto. I know they're having a fight right now about whether that evidence is admissible, but it probably is. It should be a pretty straightforward prosecution, and continually just heaping all of this stuff on it. Oh, let's call it terrorism. Oh, let's try the death penalty. Oh, let's prosecute him. Let's send him the truth. I mean, I think they're making a little bit of a mess of the case in what's supposed to be a straightforward case. Whatever you think of Luigi Mangione, I buy the premise that he is entitled to due process and a fair defense. That is a fundamental right of everybody in the United States. And so we're going to keep our eyes on that to make sure he gets a fair trial. He's in New York. He should be able to get a good jury. It's going to be tough to select a jury in this case, again, because of all the public attention, because of all the stuff that's out there. But I'm confident that these courts can do it. So that's where we are. Luigi Mangione, the race to the courthouse continues. We will keep an eye on it right here on So Sue Me. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our little endeavor here. Thanks for watching. For now, we are adjourned.